والصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا رحمة للعالمين وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا شفيع المسلمين.
Respected elders, bulugs, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi
wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So inshallah today, as I release a continuation from the bayan in Village Street in relation to the nature of Islamic governance. I remember we're in the season of political canvassing, political decision making, and then so I thought it's pertinent in these 2 weeks to talk about the Islamic notion of governance. And remember, the hukum shari isn't just to read your salah, as I often say. The hukum shari is very jami'. It encompasses every aspect of our life, meaning that there is divine guidance. There's Allah की जो रहनुमाई नबूवत के ज़रिए जो हमें मिलती है ना, वो हर यानी कि पहलू में हमारे लिए उसकी रहनुमाई. In human condition we have different circumstances. इस्लाम एक मुकम्मल ज़ाबता हयात है. इस्लाम सिर्फ ये नहीं कि आप बस नमाज पढ़ो और पूजा जब हो जाए तो फिर बाकी जो मर्जी करो दुनिया में. ये हिंदुइज्म का तस्वुर है. हिंदुइज्म है कि पूजा करो और फिर बाकी ना कोई एथिक्स है, ना कोई मॉरल्स है, बाकी बिल्कुल फिर बॉलीवुड वाला सिस्टम करो, बस पूजा ना छोड़ो. ये हमारा तस्वुर दीन नहीं है. हमारा जो दीन है मुकम्मल ज़ाब्ता है, यानी हमारे दिल के अहकाम है, हमारी आंखों के अहकाम है, हमारे आपस में रिश्तेदारी के अहकाम है, हमारे लेन देन में, तिजारत में, इक्तिसादियात में, इज्तिमाइयात में और सियासियात में. एक बड़ा पावरफुल दिन है, यानी कि ये पावरफुल जिसके लिए हमें शुक्र अदा करना चाहिए. al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. This is a complete religion. This is a complete religion, and so this religion gives guidance for us in every aspect of our life. It gives us a sense of direction, how best to live and lead every aspect of the human condition. And one of those aspects, as I mentioned in the masjid in Village Street, was in relation to ruling. So Islam gives guidance in terms of ruling, how to govern, how to conduct the affairs of the state, so to speak, how to conduct the governance of the state, of society, of community. And so in relation to this, I'll mention a first principle. The first principle of Islamic rule is Haqmiyat. Haqmiyat belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Haqmiyat, meaning our legislation in relation to the morals and ethics, and in relation to the rituals, and in relation to the sense of truth, and the sense of falsehood, in relation to justice, in relation to equity, all that can only come from Allah. La shari'a illallah. You say La ilaha illallah, is La maqsuda illallah, La mawjuda illallah, La shari'a illallah, La khaliqa illallah, La fa'ila illallah. And this is Tawheed. Our religion is going back to ultimate reality. Our religion is a religion of wahda. It's a religion of unicity, right? Allah, the messengers came to bring us away from kathra, from multiplicity, from deviation, is to bring us back to the center, you see. And so Haqmiyya belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in relation to the ethical, moral, the sense of justice and truth, you see. And after Allah, it's the Anbiya alayhi salam. After that, no one has the right to tell us that this is right and this is wrong. This is good and this is bad. Or this is just and this is unjust. That belongs only to Allah. Why? Because He's the maker. He knows what's good for us. He knows what's bad for us. He knows if we lead this kind of life, it is iniquitous and leads us to problems.
He knows that if we adopt another aspect, he knows it's good for it. He is a maker. And that right belongs only to the maker. Right? The non-maker can't manufacture and change programs, as it were. Right? The ultimate designer, the architect, has that right only. As for aspects of how best to run an economy, the best economic system, or the best system, urban planning, or management of urban affairs, or civic aspects, or in terms of what's the best educational system to improve quality in education, that we have the right over. That is given to us for us to decide. And that's based on what? Siyasa Sharia, it's based on siyasa of governance, people's ijtihad. Some people say this is the better economic policy. Some people say this is the best social policy. Some people say this is the better version of education. This we have a right over. This we can. And much of politics is essentially this. And I mention this distinction because when a parliament decides to say that homosexuality is completely fine, as Muslims we are not to accept that. Because that is an aspect of Haqmiyat in relation to ethics, in relation to morality. If the parliament decides to wage unjust wars, illegal wars, and occupation, we Muslims will not support this parliament. We Muslims do not, remember, we do not support injustice. We do not support tyranny. We do not support terrorism. We do not support illegal occupation. We do not support helping other countries in this world to cause devastation in the world, you see. So if they say on the other hand that, supporters in this educational policy or this urban management or this civic management, la ba'sa fiha, la ba'sa fiha. And so ultimately our ethics comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in relation to the general, I'm going to offer some general principles, usul of siyasa al-shar'iyya, usul of political governance, you see. And these usul are all ultimately from the Quran and Sunnah. So the first usul of Islamic governance, and remember this governance isn't only in relation to state or in relation to community, it's in relation to the self. Remember, we are the ultimate governors. Everyone, kullukum ra'in. Every one of us is a shepherd. And every responsibility we have has an implication, you see. So we are governors of our nafs. We are governors of what we possess, you see. And so I'm going to offer governance principles in terms of how Islam advises us, how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam directs us in terms of the best form of governance, you see. So the first principle of governance is based on the verse of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. He says, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ. When Allah tested, when Allah gave ibtila to Sayyidina Ibrahim, he completed the test, he passed the test. He surrendered to Allah in situations where vast majority of people would not have. And we know the accounts of the Abrahamic sacrifice, the surrender, the taslim, the Islam, compliance to the divine will in the face of the opposition of the whole world, you see. And he passed, فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ, right? Then, قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. Then Allah says, having passed these tests, so there's meaning that then Allah says, I will, إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ, I'm going to make you the imam of people. I'm going to make you the imam of, I'm going to make you the leader of people. So the first principle we learn from this is leadership is qualified. Leadership is qualified, meaning that any old person or any Tom, Dick and Harry cannot become a leader. This leadership has prerequisites. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ. Meaning that Ibrahim went through this process, the furnace of ibtila, the trials. Through these trials, he became more learned, more wise. He became closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the condition of leadership is based on istifa. Allah does istifa. Istifa is to select the saf, select the best, you see. And so leadership cannot be accepted by the most exceptional people, you see. This is why Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he says, تَفَقَّهُوا قَبْلَ تَسَوَّرُوا. he said that become faqih, meaning become learned before you become leaders. Become learned before you become leaders. Meaning if ignorant people take charge of the affairs of humanity, they don't know what's right and wrong, they don't know what's ethical and unethical. So they do not have the knowledge and wisdom and the insight to govern, you see. So the first principle of governance is in relation to qualification. Only qualified people are accepted in this momentous responsibility. Then Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says in relation, what about my children? And what does Allah say? La لن ينال أحدي الظالمين. That this covenant, this entrustment, this opportunity for governing the affairs, لن ينال أحدي الظالمين ولا ينال أحدي الظالمين. This covenant is not given to zalimin. Meaning this covenant, this sacred duty is not given to zalimin. Meaning this is given to mafhum mukhalif of this covenant, my covenant. My authority is given to adilin, people of justice and equity and qist, you see. So this is not given to zalimin. And why do I mention that? There are many people today who claim to have the authority to rule over Muslims. There are many people who are claiming that my group and my jama'ah is the best jama'ah. And yet they are from the very zalimin. And so, for example, we have people, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they claim that we are establishing Islam. But when you look at the Islam, is it the Islam of adl? Is it the Islam of Islah? Is it the Islam of equity? And we realize, no, it's not. This is the Islam of oppression. This is the rule of oppression. This is killing people, innocent civilians. This is raping women. This is pillaging, ransacking communities. This is fasad fil ard. This is not Islam. And so, therefore, any group which claims to have authority to rule over Muslims, they must fulfill the principles of equity. They must otherwise there's no nusra. There will be fasad after fasad. There will be fasad. And we know of cases in Kashmir where groups went out to do jihad against the tyrannical Indian rule there, right? And they claim to do jihad there. They claim to help the Muslims there. And yet, at the same time, they are desecrating the sacred. We know the soldiers, these so-called mujahideen groups, right? After doing jihad with the mushrikeen, they would go to the mazarat of the awliya. They would take the cloaks off the graves of the awliya and they would wipe their boots with it. They would wipe their boots, right, with the cloaks on the blessed graves of the awliya, alayhimus salam wa alayhimur ridwan, you see. And yet they're doing jihad. And jihad, and there's no nusra, there's no victory, because they're desecrating the sacred. وَمَنْ يُعَذِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. If we cannot give the respect to the sacred, then there's no nusra from Allah. And so the first principle of Islamic governance is adl, is justice, is equity, it's qualification, you see. And the second principle of Islamic governance is that the whole point of governance is what? What's the point of Islamic governance, right? What's the point of it? What's the meaning of it? What's the ultimate outcome? And Allah gives us the ultimate outcome in relation to the blessed rule of Islam. What does Allah say? الَّذِينَ إِن مَّكَّنَّاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ وَأَمَرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَلِلَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ. Those people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives authority in the land, what do? Do they use this authority to build their own bank balances? Do they use the authority to proliferate immorality and wickedness? No. What do? Number one, أَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ. They establish prayer. They establish your connection with your Maker. They connect you to the ultimate reality, you see. وَآتَوُوا الزَّكَاةَ. And they give the sadaqat, right? They help people. Meaning that the first focus of the Islamic governance is to, at the vertical level, is to connect people to their holy Maker. The second aspect is to do ihsan to the creation of Allah, meaning that they help the poor, they help the oppressed, they help people who are going through adversity and difficulty, you see. وَأَمَرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and they enjoin good. Ma'ruf is something which basically means piety, meaning that our aql accepts piety, virtue, birr, kindness, generosity, generous heartedness, right? And all of these virtues. And so these are people who establish virtue in society. وَنَهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, and they forbid evil and iniquity and immorality. So in an Islamic society, there isn't this wicked, immoral pornography. There aren't drugs and narcotics. There isn't oppression. There isn't perversions. There isn't immorality and wickedness. So in a just Islamic polity, the whole point of it, the ultimate end is not just for power, is not supremacy, is ultimately to bring about a condition of virtue. Meaning that the whole point of the Islamic polity is that people can have ma'rifah of their Holy Maker. People have developed good akhlaq, formation of character, and ultimately people enter Jannah. Why is this significant? Because remember, dear brothers, this life is an ibtila. This life is this ultimate test. This life isn't a walk in the park. Allah didn't create this life for no purpose. Allah created this life for this ultimate purpose of worship and ubudiyyah to Allah, to become virtuous, to become good in their character, to become kind and generous, to realize the secrets of what it means to be human, you see. And this world is a place of test. So there are going to be challenges, there are going to be tribulations, there are going to be problems, you see. And so the just Islamic governance is to make this test easier, to make this ibtila easier. This is the blessing of Islamic governance. So only people who live in non-Islamic lands, when we see injustice, when we see pornography, when we see perversion spreading in this land, when we see alcoholism, narcotics, and all of these evils and vices that are destroying humanity, that are making people sick, making people go through deepest anxiety. And who encourages this? An unjust Islamic and an unjust society. So the whole point of Islamic rule is to bring about teachings, is to bring about governance, is to bring about policies that enable people to worship their Maker with ease, you see. And the third principle of Islamic governance is adl, is to establish justice. The whole point of Islam is justice, is to bring equity, is to bring fair play, is to bring equality to society, right? And we know that from the example of the rule of the Khulafa al-Rashidun. So we have examples where Christians would write letters to Muslim armies, and they would say that you come to us and you rule over us, because our Christian rulers have oppressed us, right? These are non-Muslims. When they hear about the justice of Islam, when they hear about the equality, when they hear about the fact that rulers actually look after their people, then they are writing petition letters to Muslim governors. There are letters written to Abu Ubaidah, saying to him and encouraging him, rather even petitioning him to come to their villages and their cities and to rule over them. And if Islam was a religion of tyranny, non-Muslims would never have made these letters. Non-Muslims would never have made these requests, you see. So Islam is about rule of law. It's a rule of law, meaning that Islam isn't based on whims or caprice or hawa. Islam is based on ethics, it's based on justice, right? And this rule of law applies to all, meaning that situation where only rich people, right, are free from the rule of law, as existed in Jahili society. In Jahili society, if you were a person of nobility and high rank, and you did something wrong, people would pardon you, there was no issue, right? As for poor people, or people with less income, or people with low power, they would be, the rule of law would apply to them. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to get rid of that type of injustice. He said to the point that even if my daughter Fatima committed theft, I would exact the punishment upon her. This is a rule of law for all people, not just for the weaker classes, right? Not just for the, and now we have, even in the Muslim world, the people in power, they usurp this power, they abuse, they do wrong, they break the law, and yet it's only the poor people who are going to prison. You look at Pakistan, for example, our country, where we come from, right? Who are the prisoners? Who are they? Poor people. People who live in villages, people with low income, right? Are there people of high economic class? No, why not? Why not? Because the rule of law doesn't apply to all. Islam is a religion, the rule of law applies to everybody. Islam is a religion where it's not based on nepotism. Nepotism is where you only allow your relatives to rule. This is forbidden in Islam, to the point that Khulafa al-Rashidin, generally speaking, right, they would forbid their relatives. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he made on his deathbed, he said that this responsibility and the burden of this responsibility, I have taken it upon my shoulders, and I forbid my children to become khulafa after me. Right? And there are people, there are Rawafid, the Shias, who condemn the rule and the personality and character of Sayyidina Umar, saying that he snatched the power from the Ahlul Bayt. And yet Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he says that I forbid my children from taking this power. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq doesn't appoint his son Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr as the Khalifa after him. And so it's a rule of justice, it's not nepotism. It's based on qualification, you see. And it's based on giving people rights and insaf and equity. A man came to Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. He said that this Baytul Mal, this wealth that you have, give a substantial amount to the elites, to the powerful people. And once they are happy with you, then you can give and share this Baytul Mal to the rest of society. And you know what the response of Amir al-Mu'minin is? He said, woe to you. He said, woe to you. He said, you want me to use the Baytul Mal? You want me to use injustice to establish my rule? Meaning that my rule comes from justice. My mother comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My mother is angelic. My mother isn't earned by rishwa and corruption. I'm not going to give money to buy people, you see. And he said, and this is the point, he says that, subhanAllah, it's 1 o'clock. I'm supposed to have, I've got literally 3/4 left, right? Just at the final point, right? And he said that if this was my own wealth, I would distribute it to the people fairly and equally. And you're saying that I abuse the wealth of the people. यानी अमीर उल-मुमिनीन का तस्वुर ये है कि जो बैतुल माल का जो माल है ना, ये लोगों का माल है, ये लोगों का माल है, ये मेरा माल नहीं। वो फरमाते हैं कि अगर मेरा अपना जाती माल भी होता, मैं अपना जाती माल भी इंसाफ और अदल से लोगों में तकसीम करता, ये तो लोगों का माल है। This is the justice. And then Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So the Islamic government is establishing bridges, roads, pensions, welfare systems. Said on one occasion, Sayyidina Umar realized a woman who'd been widowed. She was starving, and he appointed a pension for widows. He even, to the point, he saw a zimmi, final point, he saw someone from Ahlul Zimma. These are Christians and Jews who lived in Muslim lands. He was an old man and he was begging. Sayyidina Umar said, why are you begging? He said, look, I don't have enough means to survive, you see. And Sayyidina Umar said that to him, he said, when you were young, you paid jizya. And now you have become old and you have become a beggar. Ma ansafnaka. We haven't given you justice. And he appointed a pension for this non-Muslim. You see. So Islam it's about cultivation of society. It's about justice. It's about ethics. It's about making education. It's about bringing the best welfare systems in the world. We ask Allah forgiveness for our sins. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to be people of justice and equity, to follow the blessed teaching of the Salafus Salihin, and enable us to bring these teachings in our community. وما توفيقي إلا بالله ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله وأقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين وآخر دعواي أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
ما شاء الله.